right. Welcome everyone to episode 15 of Paperboy Ventures. We've got a really fun one today as we're joined by Joelle Winand, the founder and CEO of Nutcase Milk. Nutcase is a Las Vegas-based beverage startup making better for you cashew milks that are sweetened with natural sweeteners like dates and agave. It's delicious stuff. Joe, welcome to the pod.
Hey, good to be here.
Amazing. So thanks for joining us. We're really excited to unpack the full Nutcase story today. But really, before we go there, actually want to get started in talking about you and your background prior to launching Nutcase. I know you're a former founder in the food space. You've dabbled in professional poker and just super interesting background. And while you don't have that direct CPG founder experience, you seem to be very entrepreneurial at heart. So can you just walk us through a little bit of what you've been working on prior to Nutcase?
Sure. Yeah, I definitely am one of those like serial ADHD entrepreneurs because I think this is my fourth business, and they've all been in fairly different spaces. But most recently, prior to Nutcase, I actually opened a German street food restaurant, which was totally unexpected and kind of a funny story, but short of it is I married a German guy, and this is the one thing that he missed from back home. And when he first took me to Germany and introduced me to this thing called Berlin Donor that I'd never even heard of, I just fell in love with it. And we'd come back home and be kind of like depressed because we were like, we're craving this food so bad. So, one day after a couple of years of complaining that we didn't have it, kind of just went like, why don't we just do it? Why don't we just open our own? So just like that on a whim, I figured it out, opened it, called it Wolf Down, which is kind of fun play on words. My parents, it was something that I was a hungry kid. I guess I just destroyed everything in front of me. So they always used to tell me, oh, you wolfed that down. So when I was thinking of names, that popped in my head and I thought it was fun. So yeah, experience in the food space from the restaurant side, which is a whole, that's a beast in of itself. And then was crazy enough to go like, okay, well, if that wasn't hard enough, let's do CPG.
Exactly. And so Wolf Down, what year is this when you first launched that business? And where did you launch it?
So I'm Canadian actually. So this is in Ottawa, Canada. I think we launched in 2018, 2019. We had about a year before COVID lockdowns hit, so that was fun. But we were lucky because that was just enough time to build up our user base, and then we just kind of shifted to Uber Eats and delivery, and we're able to kind of sustain. So yeah, I think it's been just over 5 years that's open.
And it's still running today, right?
It's still running. The first couple of years I was in there every day, till I just burnt myself out of it. And then fortunately now we have an amazing GM, Alex, who runs the show for me. So I've mostly removed myself from it at this point. It runs itself. I'm all in on Nutcase now.
Yeah, amazing. Okay, so from the food, I guess like the on-premise restaurant side to Nutcase, could you talk about like where did you first get the idea for Nutcase? Like what was that first piece where you started actually working on that as the next brand?
Yeah, so those two stories overlap. So that's where kind of one thing leads to the next, which is always fun. But the inspiration for it goes all the way back to childhood, and of course being I was a Nesquik addict kid who just like couldn't get enough of it, which I think a lot of people when I tell that story to are like, yep, they can relate.
I was as well. Yeah, used to crush Nesquik.
Yeah. And I still remember how sad it was kind of as I grew up and started reading labels, and the dream was just shattered. And I was like, I really should, I can't be drinking this stuff anymore. And the older I got, also, like, I just didn't feel good after drinking it. Like I got the sweet fix or whatever, satisfied my craving, but then I felt like shit after. So years went by where I just like didn't have it. I was always looking for a healthier chocolate milk that actually also tasted good. Never managed to find one. And this is where kind of serendipity comes into play. And I always like to say find silver linings. So it's funny because this all happened all because of COVID and lockdowns. So Canada especially was brutal for stuff like that. They shut down our restaurant for a couple of weeks. So I was at home, middle of winter, like just like miserable, bored out of my mind, which is a dangerous dangerous mode for me. Um, but I started craving chocolate milk, and I was like, I've got all the time in the world right now. I'm just gonna kind of Google, try to figure out how to make my own milk and whatnot. And I, I'm not vegan, but I just like cashew milk. I've tried all the different milks, and I like cashews. They're just so rich and creamy. It's my favorite nut, and I've always preferred cashew milk. I just like the texture and the flavor of it. So I was like, okay, I've got cashews. Um, Learned pretty quickly that you can, with a Vitamix, you can make anything, which is awesome. So just started experimenting with recipes, cashews, agave, um, put some dates in there, some cocoa powder, and really, was not expecting it to work because I'm not a chef. I didn't know what I was doing. And so that's probably the most shocking moment is when I actually tasted it and I was like, holy shit, this is actually good. But of course I'm biased, so I was like, gotta invite some friends over, and I ended up giving some to my friend Brooke, and she was immediately like, I think her first reaction was like, "You made this?" And I was like, she like didn't believe me. I was like, "Right? Like, what?" Um, so that confirmed that it was good, and I gave some to my husband too, who's my toughest critic, and he liked it too. So I was like, okay, this is actually drinkable. So let's next test. And this is where we're like, well, okay, we have the restaurant. Why don't we just put it on the shelf and see what happens? So we were like, okay, where do we order bottles? Like we need to put in something, and what are we gonna call it? And that's like just on a whim again. I was thinking of fun like nut food words, and I was like, nutcase. Let's just call it that. So we just printed some stickers with the word nutcase on it and the ingredients, and put it on the shelf. And that's where things got really interesting, is it just flew off the shelf. We're like, oh shit, like I kept having to run into a restaurant at midnight, make more. um and then the next piece that was really telling was that other retailers and shops nearby were coming to the restaurant, and they're like, yo, like who's your supplier for this shit, like where are you getting it from? Because they thought it was this whole other brand, and we're like, oh, like we're just making it in the back. But like seeing that, of course, that like that's when the light bulbs in my head start to go off, right? I'm like, okay, interesting, we might be onto something here. And then I'm like, okay, then I go into full entrepreneur mode, and I'm like, okay, I'm going to do my research, look at the market, look what's out there.
Yeah.
Like, I mean, I already knew there was a gap because I was looking for it, never found it. But doing more research, I kind of saw this opportunity and decided to go for it. But of course, I had no idea how to grow a business. A beverage business.
Yep.
So we started reaching out to co-packers and just trying to figure it out. Because the big thing we knew is when we were making it fresh, we only had 1 week of shelf life. I'm like, that's not scalable. So I'm like, I need to figure out how to make this shelf stable. And so yeah, we just, one thing just kind of quickly led to the next, and all of a sudden I was deep in the rabbit hole of like, hey, let's figure this out.
Got it. So basically, running that back, everything kind of came together over COVID at your house. That was like the initial product makeup and formulation out of your kitchen, which is pretty similar to a lot of food and beverage entrepreneurs. And then you moved it into the restaurant. It sold through there. And so I thought it was pretty interesting when you mentioned the brand name. Nutcase is a great name, and it seems like you just like came up with it on the spot. Like, how much time did you spend developing that brand name or going through options?
That one didn't take very long. Wolfdown took me months. Nutcase just kind of came to it. And again, just like Wolfdown was something that like I was told a lot as a kid, I was also called a nutcase a lot as a kid. So a lot of this is very
personal,
authentic, if you will. Yeah, exactly. It's like, oh, and this is kind of a running joke. Now, of course, when I'm doing something that's ridiculous, people are like, well, I'm like, well, like literally, like, what do you expect?
Literally named a brand after your personality.
Yeah,
so that's awesome.
Yeah.
And so you did it there. You sold it through the restaurant. Kind of bring us up to speed. and what the next couple of years after that looked like.
Yeah, so this is where being mid-COVID was not helpful because we were calling co-packers, calling everyone, like people were not even answering the phone. We couldn't get anywhere, and like to the point where I kind of was like, yeah, maybe this isn't going to work. Maybe it's just not possible. And this is where, like, fast forward to I don't even remember what I'm terrible with years, but and it's all a blur for the past couple of years. But we were in Vegas for a poker tournament, and we were having brunch with some friends of ours that we know through poker. And again, completely unexpectedly, we're talking about startups and investments and this kind of stuff. And they're like, oh, what's this chocolate milk I see on your Instagram? And so I was like, oh, that, yeah, like, so I just, tell them the story that I just told you. I'm like, I see this opportunity for it, but I just can't seem to like get the pieces together. And this is when all of a sudden they're like, oh, by the way, we launched a VC fund that like backs CPG companies. And I was like what? Like, how did I not know this? Or like when? And one of their portfolio companies was Mescal Bars. And they're like, oh, you should talk to Griff. He's awesome. And they have this ops guy that they're working with. He can probably like figure it out. I was like, okay. And so it's like really this like innocent brunch and you're just with buddies. And then we're just kind of joking about it. And I remember very clearly them saying like, yeah, we'll make the intro. And they're like, but hey, like if this happens, you have to like let us in the first round. And I was like, yeah, deal, sure. And left that brunch being like, yeah, okay, cool. Like, let's talk to this guy. Let's see. But then of course, like just talk to him. He's like, yeah, talk to David, talk to this guy. And as soon as I had that phone call, then he was just like, oh yeah, like this is awesome. And here's the guys you need. Here's your formulator. Here's your this, that. And then just like, it just all started happening all of a sudden after like a year of like getting nowhere. Then it was just like, here you go. And it happened so quickly that I remember like at one point one day being like, I was already so far down and I'm like, oh shit, like, okay, I guess we're doing this. Like we are full in, like already committed. And went back to my buddies. So I told them like the update of like, hey, we're doing this. We have a formulator. And they kept their word and they put in the first check. And so, yeah, I mean, what happens in Vegas, right?
That's amazing. Yeah, I was just going to ask you if they followed through on their word. If not, you got to send them the pod and maybe they invest again. But
Yeah,
that's a cool story. So is that when it really became real in your mind that this is like a something that I could be running full time as a real business?
Yeah, well, we were definitely like, let's see it through. Let's do the R&D. Let's see. Actually, I was still unsure at that point whether you could make it shelf stable and still taste good because it's a different beast formulating for that. So that was, it's like, hey, let's do this step and see where we get.
Yeah, on the shelf stable piece, did you ever, when it came to the ingredient makeup? I know you're as clean as possible and looking at the best sweeteners that are out there. Did you ever have to look away from cashew, or was that always the core focus was to do it on cashew?
That was the one thing that was like, we're standing behind that we wouldn't stray from. And that's a flavor thing. It's a differentiation thing. It's just that's the choice and that's the brand. And so, yeah, that was the one, that plus like just keeping it as clean as possible were the two things that we were like, we're not compromising on.
Yeah. Okay. And so that got you to I guess like the first like real commercial formulation that you put out into the market. How long ago was that? And is that the formula that's out there today with the products you're selling now?
That was last year, like mid last year. We did a test production run with it, and it was close, but not quite there yet. So we actually ended up tweaking just like a tiny bit, just sweetening it a little bit because it was the chocolate was coming through a bit too much. It was a little bitter. So we tweaked a little bit from there, but and then of course the packaging as well. Like the sleeves didn't come out the way we wanted them to. So we did a few more tweaks between kind of last 2 summers ago and when we ended up actually launching, which was just May of this year.
Yeah. And so as far where you are now, the formulation's done. Are you still making tweaks, or is this like this is
Hard to say. Like we'll always keep an open mind. I think we're confident, we're happy with where it's at, and the feedback is good. But who knows? Like I said, there's always you always hear of brands that like few years in make like one little tweak, or like they've learned something key and adapted to it for some reason. So we keep an open mind. We're still pretty early in that stage. I think the item that we're still probably most trying to dial in is just the messaging of where we fit in and what the key benefit, or like our challenge is like we have a lot of benefits going for us, and it's like which one's going to resonate the most, so that we have like a clear focus, because it's almost like too much right now. We're like, oh, it's high potassium and it's clean and it's this and that
protein, right? And
yeah,
it's to figure out the order of the
the
messaging
hierarchy, yeah,
hierarchy. Yeah,
yeah.
absolutely. Well, it sounds like you're in a great place with the product, the brand, and then nothing ever works out for the first time in CPG, especially when you're starting up. So it's funny. It's always these 5-year overnight successes, and to the point where you finally hit an inflection point and you're ready to go. So yeah, it feels like that point might be coming soon for Nutcase. But when it comes to where you're at now, I know you mentioned you launched in May, right? And I think you brought a co-founder onto the business maybe before that is probably worth mentioning. So could you tell us a little bit about that story and how you came into business with this guy?
Yeah, so I mean, it's good. You mentioned obviously I play poker quite a bit. That my husband and I, that's kind of the hobby that we bonded over, and we were lucky enough to make some really great connections in the poker world. And this is where my stance is always like, people say that golf is like the sport of business for networking. I'm like, try poker. Like the amount of connections that we've made and great contacts through poker, and actually almost all of these things, when I look back, I'm like, how did I connect with that person? It always leads back somehow to a poker game. But this one in particular, so we are friends with one of the probably the most popular big names in poker, which is Phil Hellmuth. And we hadn't seen him in a little bit, and we caught up one day, and he was kind of like, what are you up to? And I was like, oh, I've got this healthy chocolate milk. And he was just like, what? He's like, chocolate milk? He got all excited and giddy. He's like, I love chocolate milk. He was like, send me some. So I did, and he loved it. And so he ended up investing and becoming an advisor. And funny chain of events, he played a high stakes poker game in LA with all these creators. So it was like Mr. Beast, Ludwig, XQC, and Ninja. And he sat next to Ninja, and the two of them really hit it off well, and they had kept in touch. So when he invested, Phil, he was like, we should send some to Ninja. And I was like, yeah, sure, okay. Like, not really. Again, I'm always like, yeah, we'll see what happens, right? I never get my hopes up kind of thing. But so he texted Tyler and CC'd me on the text, and immediately Tyler's like, yeah, this looks awesome. Like, I'd love to try it. So we sent him some, and he tried it, and he immediately was like, I love this. Like, this is so cool. He's like, I have a massive sweet tooth, and this is like satisfying it right away, and especially like late at night. And he's like, I feel much better about it than going for ice cream or something. So he immediately got it. I was like, oh, I was kind of blown away. I was like, that's so cool. And he was the one who was like, I'm interested in doing something together. And I was like, okay, cool. So we were talking about it. Then we were like, well, if we want to do something like really where he's really involved and we're going to get into business together, then we should at least meet in person to make sure like we vibe well and stuff. So I remember, so he's like, okay, come down for dinner. So I remember telling my husband, I was like, I need to go to Florida. And he's like, why? I was like, dinner with Ninja? And my husband's a gamer, right? So he's just like, what the fuck? And he's like, oh, that's sick. Cool. Like,
Can I come?
Yeah, he's like, go meet them. And then like, and they've now since met, and like it's like instant bromance, as I expected. So like they're good. It's hilarious. But so yeah, I met him. We hit it off immediately. It was just so easy and natural. So we talked about what he wanted to do, and he was just like, he was so chill. He was just like, yeah, I'm good with whatever. Like, what do you think? And so yeah, we brought him on. He actually came on as a co-founder. It's a straight equity deal kind of thing, because people are always like, now it's a double-edged sword now, because people think we're a lot bigger than we are, because they're like, oh, you got like these big names behind it, and I was like, we're still like just a brand new baby startup kind of thing. These guys just love it, and it's awesome to have them on board, but we're all still figuring it out together.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's pretty amazing the people, the quality of people that you have involved at such an early stage, and the communities that you're going to be able to tap into, which is what really I find really, alluring about what you're doing. The gaming community with Ninja, there's an
Mhm.
angle there. The whole poker community with Phil and your background, and in all of your contacts there. So it is. My head kind of goes back to what you mentioned about like almost like the product messaging and hierarchy. It's like, where do you go first? Because
Yeah.
there's a lot of people that have grown up, I'll say like chocolate milk drinkers, and yeah, it kind of comes down to like prioritization, right? And like where you're placing your bets. And I know that's kind of a broad question, but
Mhm.
with where you're at now, I know you launched in May. Can you just kind of talk to us about maybe like where you've seen the best blocks of initial traction, and then where you're planning to focus for next year?
Yeah, so we initially launched D2C only on Shopify. And that was strategic because we wanted to get that feedback first. We know like retail is a whole other beast. So we're like, let's launch here, get some feedback, build our fan base, build the audience, and then be able to kind of leverage that to go into retail. So we're just kind of shifting from that phase now to like we're starting to talk to retail, but we wanted to try to get some of this intel before. And honestly, we've gotten a lot of great feedback, but it's also been on the flip side, it's somewhat even more confusing, because we've seen demand from all over. Like it's Texas, and then you're like Nebraska, and then you're like Idaho. Like the orders are coming in from all over the place, and it's all sorts of different types of people. So it's like, okay, that hasn't exactly helped us nail down like this is our demo clearly. Um, if anything, it's just confirmed that the demo is quite broad. Um,
Yep.
and even the people who are ordering it are using it in different ways, whether it's post workout or late night sweet fix, or like a parenting hack where like they get their kids to drink it, and it, like kids are stoked, but they don't know they're drinking something healthy. Um, so it's been cool to get that response, and that's been like good validation for us, I
Yeah.
guess. But now we're like, okay, well, maybe we might even be more confused now. Um,
Yeah.
we launched GoPuff as well, and that went really well. And they're really happy with the traction that we're getting there. And so now we're right at that inflection point where we're taking that and starting to shift and prepare for retail. And that's been really cool as well, because the product and the branding in of itself is getting attention. And then when you when you layer in Ninja being on board, and I don't know if I guess I didn't mention even more recently, Steve Aoki has joined the team. Also, he fell in love with our latest flavor, which is the strawberry. So with both of them behind it, and a disruptive product with a brand that kind of stands out, definitely we're getting a ton of interest from retail. And now we have to kind of go, okay, strategically, we want to walk before we can run. So even though you're getting the interest from the big guys, you kind of like this bright shiny object, but we want to do it strategically and smart. So I think that's the groundwork, or what we're figuring out right now, is what's the roadmap. But we have some great kind of regional chains on board that we're going to do the initial test with. So one of them is there's a convenience store chain in across Vegas, Nevada called Terribles, and they have 150 plus locations. And it's a great guy running it, and he's pumped about the brand and working with us. So that's like a really cool initial test. That's like, we can handle that, and then use that as test what kind of marketing works, what kind of promotions work, do all of that, and then strategically go from that to the next one. So
Smart.
we're trying to be smart about it because there's a lot of really exciting opportunities that come to on your door, and they're like, hey, do you want to talk to Target? Do you want to talk to Costco yet? And I'm like, no, like we're not. You can't go from 0 to 100 and not have it blow up in your face. So it's really exciting times in that world. The other key thing though is by having this deal with Terribles and it's a pretty big player to have at our stage. But what's really cool is because they work with, in terms of distribution networks, they work with Core So they basically got Core to activate us, which it's very rare for a brand this small to get activated by like a national distributor like that.
Totally.
So because we have them backing up, that opens this. And then now all our sales team that we just brought on that is working, like they're like, this is awesome, because they can go to C stores anywhere and be like, yeah, we have distribution.
Yeah. Right.
So there's a few things like that we're trying to like leverage in our favor to do things better, if you will.
Yeah, I think it's super smart to kind of roll with the test and learn approach. I've seen and been a part of brands that have launched too fast across thousands of stores all at once, and it looks great on paper, but from a support standpoint, you don't yet know exactly what works and how expensive it's going to be to really find the right group of consumers.
All the big brands I talked to that did that, I've like, they've all said like, what would you do differently? And they're like, go slower.
Less stores, yeah,
Um,
get like a true test case that you can learn
yeah,
from, and then you have something sustainable. But it's a congrats on Aoki joining. That's super exciting, and it kind
yeah,
of, I was talking about the gaming and poker worlds, and now you can tap into like music
yeah,
and concerts and electronic, that whole world as well. So it's
yeah.
pretty
My part,
fascinating how that's coming together.
yeah. It's again, there's like, it seems random, but it's also somewhat strategic, or it works. It all serves itself very well because my partner, his background is with a company. His previous business basically runs all of F&B for Insomniac. So we have an in with Insomniac that runs EDC and all the other major festivals.
Mm-hmm.
So we'll be activating through that as well, because that's his world and he has all the connections there. So all of that just ties in to each other really well. And Aoki likes gaming, so we're going to do some live streams with him and Ninja. So that it's just, and they get along. Everybody plays poker, so
Yeah.
it's
Right.
good to.
Right. I'm a golfer, so
Yeah.
I disagree with your point, but I could see it.
Fair.
I do play poker as well, so I'll take both, honestly.
Okay. Fair.
But cool. So as far as just touching back on the more traditional, like the off-premise
Mhm.
sales world, then I kind of want to double click on the on-premise side of things. So do you feel like convenience stores, gas stations, is that kind of like the launching off point for testing channels? Is
That's
talk about
it's a good focus. I feel like it will do well there. We'll also look at natural and conventional. Of course, it's interesting because the product itself, like if you look at it as a nut milk and clean ingredients, then you think like it's okay, it's perfect for natural, but we also don't want to pigeonhole ourselves to just natural. But when you look at the brand and all that, then it, to me, that screams more like the convenience channel. So, and that's where the testing is going to come in. We're going to try a few of these and then see which one we have the best response and velocity in, and we'll just double down on that.
Yeah, awesome. Love that approach. And when it comes to, I guess, the less traditional sales channels, and you talk about hotels and things
Yeah.
like that, and shows, what's the strategy around that? Kind of where you're going to be putting your bets for next year?
So that one we come, it's a bit more opportunistic, I guess. So through our networks and connections, we're getting different leads So we've got we're talking to a lot of the casinos across Vegas. And we've had some cold outreach from different like luxury hotels and whatnot that just saw the brand and was like, oh, this looks really sleek. Like, and so a lot of that's just coming to us and we're taking it as it comes. And then we also just actually listed on Pod Foods and got a couple like really interesting requests. So it's, and that's a function of like, I think that's where we rely on like the brand standing out and people being intrigued, and that seems to be working right now. And people are just reaching out. They're like, "This is cool. Like, what's going on? What are you guys doing?"
Yeah. What is this? Why does it
Yeah.
taste so good? But yeah,
Mhm.
I mean those are the areas where you're going to build a ton of brand awareness, and people are going to first try the product, and then
Yeah.
I'm sure as they move on, get familiar with the brand, that it'll become more grocery, convenience stores, that kind of traditional way about it.
Mhm.
As far as your marketing plans, I know you mentioned I think there's a poker tournament coming up that you're putting on. Yeah, what are you working on over there from a marketing standpoint?
Right. So, clearly, having Aoki and Ninja on board is a big component of it. We are so in Vegas next week. There's F1, so we're planning a big live stream poker tournament where Ninja, Aoki, and we're inviting a couple more celebrity friends to play. And so it'll be live streamed. It's all Nutcase branded. So like the poker felt, the whole stream will be about Nutcase. That'll get live streamed and usually reaches a pretty big audience. That's just a really random fun thing we can do in terms of like an event or activation that is really authentic to us and to the brand, and it gets those guys involved, which is super fun. The next big thing that we've got in the works is we're just actually loading up our TikTok shop, and they've been, you know, the internal team is really intrigued by what we're doing, so we're getting a lot of assistance from them, which is really cool. So they're going to put a lot of resources to help us blow it up because I mean it was a really funny thing because both Ninja's guy and Aoki's guy on the same day, unbeknownst to me, were like, "Hey, we're gonna introduce you to our TikTok guy, or whatever." And apparently, they have the same TikTok guy. So this guy on the same day got emails from Aoki's guy and Ninja's guy, and they're like, "Hey, you guys should help Nutcase or like should work with Nutcase." So I got on a call with them. He's like, "Who are you? Like, what is going on?" So that's really cool, and their team's been really great. Like, so we're planning some really cool TikTok lives and stuff with those guys, and having the shop ready to go and having it
Yeah.
all shoppable. So I'm really intrigued to see what that does. And then the final like big thing that is kind of unique that we've got in the works that we haven't really told uh, many people about yet, but we are preparing to raise a round of equity crowdfunding, which not everybody's familiar with, but basically allows the general public to invest alongside VCs and celebrity investors and this kind of stuff. So you can invest for a few $100. So we decided to go that route because we want we already have awesome fans and had a lot of people requesting like, hey, can I invest or whatnot? And we're like, not unless you're an accredited investor and this kind of stuff. So we like that. It's a great way to really engage people, to let them, get in on the action. The even cooler part of that is when we were approached by a platform that runs these crowd funds. This one in particular also, as a marketing vehicle, has launched their own show called Going Public. And they've done 2 pilot seasons of it that were pretty much mostly just aired on Market Watch, which is like owned by Dow Jones. So it's like really for the finance bros, kind of like very tied to the finance world, which is cool. It's been really successful regardless. But they wanted to get more mass distribution for the show. And just as they were starting to talk to me, they were having conversations with X, and I guess X has been wanting to really start to push their own original content. So when they heard about this show, they're like, "Oh, this would be perfect for us to promote and stuff." So X has gotten behind it. So now the idea is that this show will feature Nutcase and will be streamed on X as one of their first original shows, and they're going to put all of their marketing might behind it because they really want that aspect to succeed. So that's going to be really interesting to see what it does, and it should give us a ton of exposure in a really unique fashion.
Very
And that
cool.
just we got it all the pieces just fell into place perfectly because just at that time, and they were looking. They always feature 3 companies, and they were looking for. They really wanted a company that was female founder, creator backed, and was a cool CPG product. And they're like, check, check. They're like, okay, you're
Triple
made for
check.
this.
Yeah.
So as much as I'm horrified at the idea of being on TV or like on camera, this is one of those moments where at first I was like, yeah, no, I'm not doing it. And then like, no, you have to. Um, and then, the more they pitched me and the more I started to understand the opportunity for Nutcase, it was one of those moments I'm like, I just have to suck it up and do it for the business. So
Yep. Gotta do it. So that's
yeah,
super cool. When does that, do you have a date? Is that next
they're
year?
they're aiming for mid-Feb to launch it. So
Cool. And then as far as the poker tournament that's
Mhm.
streaming, is that next
Yeah,
week? Where can people stream
it'll
that?
be next Saturday. So it'll be at the very least, it'll be all of Ninja's channels. So Ninja's Twitch, Ninja's YouTube, and maybe TikTok and stuff. So yeah, that's Saturday afternoon, right before the F1 races.
Cool. All right. We'll definitely check that out.
Mhm.
And yeah, to close things off here, we've talked quite a bit about the backstory, kind of where you're at now, and what the next year might look like. But would love if you could zoom out a little bit and talk on a broader scale on kind of what's the end goal here.
Yeah,
Yeah. What's your thought?
I I mean, at the highest level, the way we are look at it is like we want to take on Nesquik, and no one's really took them on head to head with a healthier version, to something that's more from a packaging standpoint appeals to adults, and that's just cleaner. Also, that's friendly for lactose intolerant. So that's the simplest way to do it, is or to look at it is like we're taking on Nesquik. We also are doing it with a cashew milk. So we believe that we can make nut milk more mainstream. So that was also a key element that we want to do, is not pigeonhole ourselves to just being in that category. And one of the things that we kind of are pretty proud of is how many non-nut milk drinkers we've converted that are like, I wouldn't drink nut milk, and then like taste this and like, oh, this is actually good. So I think there's a massive opportunity there to greatly increase the size of that. I mean, that market's already growing, and I think that by making it more approachable or more cool for the average consumer, we can really expand that. And then that, candidly opens up to exits to potential partners across the board. The obvious ones like would be Pepsi, KDP, but even like the Nestle's and the Unilevers. They're always looking for disruptive brands that can fill a void. So that's all on our radar.
Lofty goals, but I love it. I mean, you're not going to do anything bold and incredible without that kind of vision. But as far as the Nesquik piece goes, it sounds like you want to do this like for years and years to come. I would imagine, because it's going to take a while to build to that scale. So you first started Nutcase in what year?
I mean, the R&D, so that was 2 years ago, and then we launched it this year. So yeah, it was just over a year of like figuring it out, R&D and putting the pieces together, kind of thing. So,
Yeah.
but yeah, but we're not even a year in market yet, so it's still very early.
Right, still fresh. And
Mhm.
if you had to take a dart and throw it at a year where you can get to that point, do you think this is a 5-year project, a 10-year, 20-year project?
I'd say at least 5. I think we're gonna go all out for see what we can get done in 5, and then see where we're at that
Yeah,
point.
reevaluate there.
Yeah.
Amazing. Well, hey, congrats on all the progress. It's a super exciting time, and it's fun to watch all the things that you're doing with the brand, and it's certainly got a good chance. It's the hardest industry I think ever to succeed in CPG, especially on the startup side. But you've definitely assembled a team of Avengers that could make this happen. So
Yes.
nicely done, and congrats.
Avengers. I like it. I
Yeah.
like it. Awesome.
Well,
What?
yeah,
Yeah.
thanks so much for joining, Joe. And yeah, we'll have more details in the Paperboy Ventures newsletter. So appreciate you joining, and can't wait to follow the journey.
Thanks for having